So where we left off with Plan Z, we have a horribly fat condition just off idle. As soon as you open the throttle, it just rains fuel out of the boosters. And then on the top end, we have it goes lean. Right? Carburation issues. Comments. So many of you guys with the comments. Put a 390 Holley on it. The 650 is too big. You can't make that work. Put a 2-barrel on it. Listen to me, guys. You could not possibly be more wrong. Here's what you have to understand about carburation, CFM carburation. Here's the essential of it. When manufacturers make a recommendation, there's the formulas. CFM times this times that, whatever the hell it is. Doesn't make any difference. When they make a recommendation as far as engine size and CFM, they're talking about a driver car. They're talking about it's your regular car, maybe a street strip car, but whatever. Throttle response, drivability, part throttle is more important than anything else. They're not taking full throttle, ultimate performance goals into consideration when they do that. And the easiest illustration of this, the most obvious illustration of this is like a pro stock car, which has got 2,400 CFM worth of Dominator on top of 500 cubic inches. They run, what, 8,500 RPM or so? It blows the formula completely out of the water. Now, when we're talking about the Slant Six here, the cars, the fastest cars, and we use the Ruster. I'm going to use the Ruster as an example because that's a fantastic car. It's a fantastic package, and it's very, very similar to this in that it weighs exactly the same as this. The motor is approximately the same size. It's got approximately the same cam. It's got the same exhaust. It's got the same intake manifold, and he's running 760s, 1160 quarter miles with a 750 AFB, a 750 CFM AFB. Now, because of the way Carters and Edelbrocks are flowed differently, a 750 AFB would flow approximately the same as like a 680, 690 CFM Holley. I've got a 650 here. So I've actually got less carburation. But now, how does this happen? How does this work? Well, the answer is in calibration. Okay? It's not the CFM, the amount of air that will flow through the carburetor that's the problem. The issue or the hurdle that needs to be overcome is how the carburetor is picking up fuel as it goes through. So now you're talking about boosters, transfer slots, you're talking about all the enrichment circuits, the overall. It's a matter of finally calibrating the carburetors to work with the cubic inch that's available, or I should say with the characteristic, the pull that the engine is going to supply. So obviously it'll run, if you took the carburetor off completely and you just stood here with a squirt bottle, the thing would run, it would scream, right? But it wouldn't make power. You'd have uneven distribution, you'd have all kinds of issues with it. So the name of the game here is to get the distribution correct, which is something that we have finally figured out on this. I have no qualms, no questions, no mysteries about the distribution. Now the question is, how do we get fuel flow to work correctly? So this is what I found. Between the last video that we did on this and now, I found that here are the three situations that we have. Here's what I found. If I part throttle it, in other words, just bring it partially up against the converter, as I would run almost any car in an automatic transmission, just to take all of the slack out of the drivetrain, it will not leave. It just stumbles, and it doesn't misfire or anything like that, but it's just flat, and then it'll start to go. So the first like 20 or 30 feet of the drag strip, it's just going right like that. Then she turns on like crazy. If I flat punch it, the motor doesn't have enough torque. Remember, it's still a 225 cubic inch motor. The motor doesn't have enough torque to work the converter, and so the car doesn't, it comes out clean. It has just exactly the right amount of accelerator pump, but the motor itself doesn't have enough oomph to work the converter. So again, she's slow out of the hole. And then I did what should have been the obvious thing to try at the very beginning, is I brought the car. Now remember, the Ruster runs with a trans brake. All of these fast Slant Six cars run with trans brakes. Well, I don't have a trans brake in this, but I have drum brakes, and drum brakes are just as good as having a trans brake. So, and the reason I said it is because disc brakes don't want to hold the car on the starting line. You have to stand on the pedal and the gas to get it to go, or to get it to hold. With the drum brakes, it's just really just hold in the brake, flat-footed. So that's what I did. I held the brake, I flat-footed it, let go of the brake, and bam, there the magic was. The car ran out smooth, ran out perfectly and hard. So the only problems, the only hurdles we need to overcome at this point is that part throttle, so that I can do a burnout, because you can't do a burnout with this. As soon as you go to do a burnout, it wants to wash itself with gasoline, because there's only a little part throttle. You know, I mean, you can get the tires spinning by flat footing it, but then you got to modulate back, and when you modulate back, it goes fat. And also, I want the option of being able to launch not flat-footed, but in between. Perhaps just bringing it up against the converter slightly, and where I'm getting nothing now. Well, if it's leaned out at that stage, maybe I will get a harder lead that way. It's all trial and error. It's all experimentation. So, and by the way, this is exactly why I'm doing this project, because this is a challenge. This is something different. It's interesting. I've never done this before. I'm finding all kinds of situations where, you know, what do you do with this? What do you do with that? That's the fun. To answer everybody's, there are many questions in the comments. Well, put a 340 and I put a 440. I got a perfectly good run of 440 sitting on my charger. I could just plop it in there, plug it into this. The whole swap would take, I don't know, 3 hours. And then the car would go, I mean, really, really fast. I have no interest in that. Zero interest in that. My interest is making this work. So, when you've got mysteries and you're learning new things, having basic knowledge, of course, is important, but equally important is knowing who to ask for advice. Who has been through situations like this and can guide you in the right direction. So for me, right away, Andy, Unity Motorsports Garage. He works with David Vizard. These guys have spent a tremendous amount of time on the dyno. David works with small engines, very used to working with small engines. And Andy did a lot of 4.6 Ford work, and the 4.6 is a relatively small motor. So they combine, you know, the brain trust between the two of them, but especially Andy's. They know how to make these carburetors work. So, and Andy is of the same opinion as me that the 650 is the exact perfect size for the Slant Six, the 225 cubic inch motor. So I called Andy, I picked his brain, and he says, all right, so the first thing we got to do is get the thing clean, you know, we got to clean up just the calibration of the carburetor, and then we could start working on boosters. So he sends me a care package. I get this in the mail the other day, and he sends me everything I need to limit the amount of fuel through the transfer slots. So again, now, when these carburetors, when Holley calibrates these carburetors, they're intended to be bolted on a 350, 400 cubic inch V8 and put through the, they calibrate them on the fat side, right? A little more fuel than would actually be necessary. And that's so that it's like a safe zone. So if the motor gets hot, it's being lugged, it doesn't get into pre-ignition and bang up pistons and everything. So they calibrate these things a little bit on the fat side. The first step to Andy's solution is this. He sent me these restrictors. So this one's at the end of an Allen key here. So he sent me these restrictors, and the name of the game here is to, if you come over here and you look, I already threaded this hole. These inboard holes right here feed fuel directly to the transfer slots. So these restrictors are going to cut that opening in about half. So approximately half the fuel that's available to the transfer slot passage is going to go through there. So what we did here was we had to drill the hole open here. We had to tap. I don't even know what a tap. Where'd my tap go? Oh, there it is. We had to tap for the restrictor, and then we're just going to install it. Oops. You know, I should have my glasses on, right? So we're going to install it just like that. Done. Okay, so that's phase one, limiting the transfer slot. Phase two, he feels that I made a mistake blocking off the power valve. So he's suggesting that I put a power valve back in this thing and then decrease the jet size approximately 6 numbers. I think I'm going to decrease the jet size 4 or 5 numbers in the primary. So this doesn't affect the secondary side, just the primary side. And that's only because I know that it was lean out up top. So I'm going to put a power valve back in here, and I'm going to try 4 sizes smaller on the mains. Should give us about the balance. So that's phase 1, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Phase 2, and this is neat, okay? This is neat. So once we have a handle on our overall mixture, or we have a handle on the, then we go to this, and this is something I've never seen. So in the old days, when you wanted to change boosters out, you'd have to knock them out with a drift. Okay, so here's the holes where the boosters are. You'd have to knock them out, and then you'd have to swedge the new ones in. They sell a tool for that. It's something I never bothered with because on the kind of cars that I screw around with, the boosters that are there are just fine. You can work around it. This is where you start to become very finicky in a situation like this. So he feels that because of the engine's lack of overall volume, that these down leg stepped boosters, okay, so there's a, you see the way the booster reaches down here, and if you look in here and you see the booster, they just come straight out, okay? He feels that a down leg, which puts the booster closer to the throttle blade, step, and if you look in here, this is the bottom of the booster, and you can see inside there's a step. It's not smooth. Now that step, what it does is he explained that it shears any fuel flow that comes through. So basically it's cutting it off into smaller droplets. If there is a, it cuts the bigger droplets into smaller droplets. Not quite atomized, but better. So if he wants me to put this together like this, play around with the jetting, he supplied me with a bunch of blanks and some stepped and some drill bits here. We've got a 72 thousandths going in there right now. I can go down to a 62. He's got a 76. So this is something I just got to play around with, see which one's going to work best. And then once we have that calibration in the ballpark where we want it to be, then we're going to start playing around with the boosters. Now here's what I've never seen before. In the past, when you wanted to change a booster, you had to knock the old one out and then swedge the new one in. Well, this is great. Screw in and out with the use of this tool right here. So I mean, maybe I've been living under a rock, and this has been a common thing for a long time. I don't know, but I see again. I should have my glasses on. These four pins line up with these 4 holes. So you slip the booster through, you screw this on, you tighten it with this, and then you file the end of it down so it's even with the body of the carburetor, so that your metering plate seals over the top of it. But you can, using this setup here, you can try any type of booster you want. And he actually feels that because of the distribution of the manifold, by the time I'm done, I'll probably have 4 different boosters in this thing, because each part of the manifold is going to want a different, each part of the carburetor is going to want a different thing. So, but he supplied me with 4 of these stepped down leg boosters, and this will be the next thing we try. The other thing I did was I put a spacer on it. I'm adding a 1-inch spacer to it. I knew I was going to have to start adding spacers, and I have a hunch that by the time we're done, it's going to be a 2 or 3-inch spacer under there. But I'm going to throw a 1-inch under just because I have it on hand. I know it won't help. It definitely won't hurt. It may help. So that's the next step. I'm going to pull all this together, and we're going to take it out front. It's not going to a drag strip again until I do the oil pan. We have definite issues in the oil pan of this thing. As soon as it starts pulling hard, I lose oil pressure. The baffling is terrible. So I have to build a deep pan and baffle and do whatever I've got to do. So the chances of that thing seeing a drag strip again before the end of the year are slim to none. But that's where we're at with that. Now, something that is going to go to the drag strip before the end of the year is my problem child. If this car knew how much I loved it, she would treat me a lot better, right? So, Bottle Rocket's definitely going to the track before the end of the year. tore it apart yesterday. So the plan with Bottle Rocket, just real quick, because this video is supposed to be about carburetors, but I want to give you guys the update. The plan with Bottle Rocket was to disassemble these roller lifters that are in there, because these things are bleeding down. A couple of them aren't bleeding up at all. Was to disassemble these, pull the guts out, either fill washers or an epoxy, and then put it back together again. Okay. The problem is, and I ran into this yesterday, because I was like, okay, I'll just pull the lifters out, rip them all apart, and figure out what to go. Well, I can't take the gut of the lifter out past this rivet. See, this is the tie bar, and these are the rivets to hold the tie bar together. Well, the guts of the lifter, the plunger and everything, won't come up past that. I would have to grind this flush, which would render these rivets useless. And I just don't want to screw around with this. It's just, it's a waste of time. It's pointless. So I ordered a set of lifters. They'll be here early next week, like Monday or Tuesday. And we're going to swap over to these roller rockers. The only thing I need to do at that point is calculate push rod length, because I have no idea how tall the new lifters are going to be. And get a set of push rods for it, and she's back together again, and we'll take it out to the track and see what it's going to break. You guys that are impatient, you've been working on this car for so long. Listen, do me a favor. Go away for 2 or 3 years, come back and watch the playlist. Right? I work on this thing when I want to work on it. I leave it alone when it frustrates me. I come back to it. It's not on any. It's not on any schedule. I'm not on any schedule. If you're in that much of a hurry, go watch something else and come back, and then watch the playlist afterwards. So that's it. Holley carburetors, dialing in, getting specific, making the carburetor, calibrating the carburetor for the exact situation that you're up against. That's the key to it. And Andy, Unity Motorsports Garage, thank you so much, brother. You have no idea how much I appreciate the care package you sent, and we're going to make it happen. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.